Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Artenders. I'm Danny Lavelle. I am joined, as usual, by my co-host, Mac Welch.
And I'm actually here this time. This is the very first time where we are in the same room.
It's insane. We can look at each other's eyes in a sort of special kind of enkindling way, and it's magical, because this whole time we've had to do it through Zoom, and now we don't have to.
Who the hell taught you the word enkindling?
I don't know. I probably learned it from some capacity, probably a show or something. I don't know. I don't go through the dictionary, but this week, so hopefully, it'll be a little bit better. And of course, yes, Mac's professionalism, Mac Welch. Before I even discuss what we're on about, he goes ahead and just takes off his jacket and he slinks back into his chair. And I can commentate on all of this, which is great. But this week, we'll be discussing the movie 42. And the reason why I chose this movie for this week was a mixture of the times that we're living in, as well as not terribly long ago, Chadwick Boseman lost his life. And just before we started this podcast, I actually wrote a little bit of an essay of sorts that I'm going to read aloud. I'm not usually one to write, but here I am. It's rare that we can so confidently point at an athlete in their particular sport and say, that one. Take a good look. Remember their face and remember their name. They are the most important individual to ever walk in their game. Sports almost never ask for less than the best from their athletes, but in a physical manner. Since ancient times, we yearn for Herculean performances. We sink our teeth into it all, and now we wear the jerseys, the caps, the shoes, the face paints. The game started the moment we stepped onto land in our bipedal forms. I bet I could do this better than you can. I can climb that. I can kill that. I can win that. Yet the act of saying something through this lens is an act still foreign to many spectators. Only 2 years ago did Laura Ingraham tell LeBron James, arguably the face of the National Basketball Association, to shut up and dribble. Athletes attain platforms because we keep that strong eye on them, and because of their physical aptitude, we assign value to what they have to say. It is the nature of how we perceive sports. Focus breeds value. And yet, when LeBron James spoke his mind to the ongoings of American culture and politics, it was assuredly not the first time such a prolific figure in sports history offered their own 2 cents. For over a century, the United States have come into contact with incredible players who set out not only to win, but to make a statement. The tale of the athlete is as rich and ingrained as the tale of the sport. They provide their own means in the way they see fit, either on or off the playing grounds. Famously, Tommy Smith and John Carlos raised fists opposing black oppression back home. Muhammad Ali drove his feet into the mud and refused to go to war with Bill Russell, Jim Brown, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar having his back. The 1906 Olympics, Peter O'Connor, playing for Great Britain and having won the silver medal, climbed up the flagpole and unraveled the flag of his home, Ireland. And that certainly wasn't the last interaction a player had with the flag they represent, because what the flag represented, they believed, did not represent them. Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, Tony Smith, Carlos Delgado, Colin Kaepernick. But sometimes, the most beautiful transpires, and we cannot help but stare in amazement. An athlete transcends making a statement and instead becomes one. Billie Jean King and Jesse Owens were such. Athletes like them had something to prove, and only in their game, in that moment, would their messages be sent. And perhaps most famously, Jackie Robinson was such a statement. Maybe Robinson was the most important player to walk the face of this earth. Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Moses Fleetwood Walker, Ted Williams, Curt Flood, John Montgomery Ward, Roberto Clemente. Names remembered, whether for their contribution on or off the field, or perhaps greatly remembered for both. We talk in grade school about the likes of number 42. Not only having the wicked shaken their cleats for the change to come to the score of the ball game, but the change to the complexion of its future. The moment he stepped onto that field, oh, how the floodgates opened, and what beautiful water that came rolling in. The number 42 is the only number retired throughout every team in the MLB. A sacrifice through hellfire decades ago gave so many other opportunities today. We should never forget Jackie and the bravery it took to embrace the thing he loved when so many were out to hate him. The love he had for the game and his people gave strength to the courage he had. He is, to say the least, one of a kind, and in many more ways, a hero. We had some interruptions in the middle of that essay by my roommate's dog, Coda. Let's all take a moment, say hi to Coda. Hey, Coda.
Hi, Coda.
But yeah, I wrote that essay because I was really thinking to myself, like, there's so many athletes to occur, to happen, to go through their craft, their sport. Man, she is having a field day out there.
Yeah, there's an issue. There's a serious issue taking place.
I mean, she's either having a good time or a bad time. It's really hard to tell.
But very extreme, whichever one it is.
Yeah, no, it's dire circumstances.
Stakes are high.
And luckily, you know, I'm sure you came to this podcast in order to observe such professionalism. But there was something, especially when I was watching the movie 42, that stuck out to me, that that might have been the most important ball player ever. And like the other ones that I listed are in the conversation, sure, but it's hard to look at anyone else with, I mean, such a prolific impact. She's having a good time. I don't understand. It's crazy.
It's not bad. It's good.
Yeah.
In response to that, I think that when we're talking about the best of all time, I think that's a different question. But in terms of most important, like you said, I don't see how it's not Jackie Robinson.
Yeah,
and maybe like in the debate for one of the most important across all sports.
Oh yeah, certainly. In terms of his like actual performance, I looked at some stats of Jackie Robinson, and there is an advanced analytic that they use in baseball called WAR. WAR translates to win above replacement. The idea of that is, if a player has a higher WAR, that essentially means like that's the game's won because that person was playing on that field.
I see.
Right? It's a lot of math to like approach.
Is WAR an acronym, or is it like the card?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's not the card game WAR. It is wins above replacement WAR.
Fantastic acronym.
Yeah, it's a great acronym.
Someone was clever.
So you're gonna see some of the WAR leaders be extremely high, at most 12, and like Babe Ruth has like the first 3. I'm showing Mac as we speak. And we're seeing, like, for example, Babe Ruth has the single largest WAR in one individual season with 14. He essentially won 14 games for, I believe, he was playing with the Yankees at the time, right? And these are all really impressive numbers. There are a lot of players that have an extremely high WAR, and I know this is the most exciting conversation, I'm sure. And I lie when I say that. But Jackie Robinson had his highest WAR in an individual season in 1951 with 9.7. And even though there are, I'm sure there was back then, over 160 games in a season, to go out there and make a difference that large is incredible. Like, it wasn't the fact that Jackie Robinson was going out there and breaking the color barrier, and just because he was there, but also above it all, he was a fantastic baseball player. That you can't knock. That you can't knock him for not being great, because he is at the same time one of the greats.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And there's, I love the way you said that. That he didn't just break the color barrier. He was fantastic. And the crazy thing is that he had to be. Like, it wasn't a matter of, and that was something like maybe one of my grievances that I had with the movie, is that it didn't really touch on the fact that it's not necessarily that it was like a marketing ploy or something. It was that Jackie Robinson, not like they were trying to look for a black athlete. It was that name, Jackie Robinson, was genuinely the best baseball player in the world at that time. They needed Jackie Robinson in order to compete, or one of the best at the time. Sorry, and so they needed to get Jackie Robinson, and it didn't, and he was so good that it did not matter.
Right, and I think that's one of the more interesting points that the movie gets to, which I appreciate, is that not only do they need Jackie Robinson to perform well on the field, but we saw the character of Branch Rickey, I believe his name was, mentioning that not only would he be a great player, but he would also be a player that could very well break that barrier, knowing that, as well as it was a sort of marketing ploy as well to get other black individuals to come and watch the games. And if they see a black individual playing in the major leagues, maybe they can get more tickets that way. Because people, and if anything too, people... What was interesting that the movie showed was that people weren't going to stop coming because Jackie Robinson started playing in the major leagues. Instead, or at least how the movie depicted it, was a lot of people were still coming regardless whether or not he was playing, and then maybe even more so they could berate him and insult him and try to get him off the field. Then more people were bound and determined just to get to that game to have that opportunity. And I think one moment in the movie that does a good job on that too is the sort of the start of racist thinking, right? Like how it's passed on from generation to generation. And we see it, I think it was a game against the Cincinnati Reds, where Jackie is on first base. He's not playing first base. He is on first base as a runner. And we see a kid looking at his father, and his father is yelling at Jackie, calling him the N-word repeatedly. And so the kid, thinking it's the right thing to do, follows in his footsteps. So I appreciate the movie for doing that. What was there any particular moment that you appreciated the movie for, like, showing light to and sort of the reality of what was going on? Perhaps, during that time?
Yeah. There were a lot of really clever examples, like you were saying, of the most impressive part is that it showed racism as a spectrum, rather than just like everyone has the same beliefs, all the white people say the same shit. It's that there was like different levels of it.
Yeah.
Like that even whenever
when he first hit his first home run, he got back to the dugout and nobody shook his hand.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Or for instance, like the very first time in the movie where a white guy is actually willing to stand up for him, like one of his teammates.
Yes.
And he gets up in the other guy's face and he like stands up for Jackie, and the second he gets back to the dugout, Jackie's like, "Thanks." And then the guy was like, "I mean, what am I going to do? You're my teammate." And he was like,
he did the right thing, but sort of for the wrong reasons. Per se, not the wrong reasons, but certainly not the right reasons.
He was able to look at Jackie Robinson and be like, it had nothing to do with the fact that, with the fact that I don't think you're just absolutely the most disgusting person because just because of the color of your skin. Yeah. It was simply because I am a fan of baseball and this is how you play baseball.
And this is my team.
Yeah.
What were your immediate first impressions after watching the film? What was your main takeaway?
I think that...
Did you enjoy the film? Let me say that.
I enjoyed parts of the film.
Yeah.
In that, the film is more of a, series of vignettes.
Uh-huh.
It is kind of set up like it'll take you through these little these tiny mini stories of throughout Jackie's life. There are very few plot lines.
I'm gonna have to stop.
I know. I'm sorry. It's so funny.
Because to explain, if you can't hear it, I'm sorry for derailing. But Coda in the background is just keeps biting on something squeaky. And then my roommates yelled out "might be," but it's perfect. But you were saying parts of the movie succeeded, and it seems like parts of the movie did not succeed.
I think that was a perfect moment. I do not regret that for the world. But the yes, so there were far too few plot points that were followed that I got to actually hook on to and keep up with, because there was so much grabbing onto things and then letting it go, and then grabbing onto things and then letting it go. And like we've been talking about Avatar for so long.
Yes.
But like in Avatar, they grab things and let them go in order to revisit them later. Like they'll bring those characters back.
Right.
Eventually.
Yeah. A sort of callback. Yeah.
Right. And with 42, that's not really how it works. Because they're bound to history, because they're bound to, like, this is what actually happened.
Yeah.
Instead of finding the things that were consistent in Jackie's life, they just showed you the Jackie Robinson story.
Yeah.
Which, even though is a fantastic story, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of fantastic documentaries about Jackie Robinson.
Yeah.
But like in terms of storytelling, I think that they could have maybe used his wife a little better, or they could have used. I mean, Branch Rickey was okay, but it was like you just kind of got him like every once in a while for like a minute, like a single minute, or like 2 minutes.
I think a way to describe it is that even though these characters were actually people, I don't think the movie did the best job in actually representing them as people, as individuals, right? The only person we got that for was Jackie Robinson, right? Yeah. And like I think Chadwick Boseman's performance in this movie is really solid. But into my sizzle serve, I think this movie is saved, honestly, by the moment that when Jackie Robinson, after getting yelled at and insulted by Ben Chapman, that he's in the tunnel and he starts banging his bat and breaks his bat all around the tunnel, and eventually Branch Rickey comes in, I believe either general manager or the president of the Dodgers organization, and maybe saying that moment saved the movie. I mean, well, it is a sizzle serve, and I guess I have to, stand my ground in that regard. I can't really unsizzle the serve. But there were, I felt not enough moments of sort of reality. Like, I praised this movie earlier for doing some things here and there to represent or showcase the awful amounts of racism that he went through. And yet, at the same time, it felt like this movie had a weird identity, and this movie wasn't sure whether or not to be like a happy-go-lucky sort of film or like a very serious drama. And it dipped too much into both, that it's hard for me to look at it and say, it did this one thing really well. Like, no, it did these two things all right. And I think that scene in the tunnel really helped this movie as a sort of performance, a showcase. It's hard for me to look at other moments in the movie that have the same gravitas as that moment.
Gravitas.
Yes.
Yeah. Gravitas.
And of course.
I agree with you there. And oh my gosh, that freaking breath work. That body work that he did in that tunnel, unreal. I was like, oh, someone went to school for this. I was, he was really showing some.
I'll say too, like I enjoy the movie, and it's one of those movies that if I was watching cable television and I was just scrolling through channels, I'm like, oh, 42 is on, I'll put it on, right?
Oh yeah.
I'm not opposed to the movie. I enjoy the movie.
We're at the first Transformers level already. Because that is how I define Transformers.
That's a really low bar, though.
I know, which is why I'm trying to tell you that that's the low bar.
Okay, fair enough. To me, it's a high enough bar, right?
Transformers is always on FX, and I'll always leave it on if I needed something in the background.
Interesting, because like if I'm gonna watch a movie again, that's to me like a compliment, right?
Okay. It's rewatchability.
Yeah. But I wouldn't seek out watching 42 again.
Yeah.
If somebody else wanted to be like, hey, let's watch 42, I'm like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
But I would not suggest that movie. And honestly, probably, I haven't seen a Jackie Robinson documentary, but I'm sure they do a better job in sort of telling the story of combining the struggles that he went through and how much of a fantastic player he was.
Yeah. I've seen two, purely because my dad is a sports fanatic.
Yes.
And both of them were made by awful documentarians. And they had very little emotion involved. But I mean, you can't get over the fact that the story of Jackie Robinson is absolutely fucking insane.
Yeah.
And such a beautiful and timeless story.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that never stops being true. Sorry. To mention the documentaries.
Thank you. So after this break, we will keep discussing 42.
All right, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Now, just let me explain. First of all, it's free. Second of all, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a whole bunch more. And third, now this is really important, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Hear me when I say no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
And welcome back to the Artenders with Mac and Dan. So, before I get into my gold medal,
Okay.
before I hop into that, I just wanted to tell you, because we haven't really talked about it yet, congrats on moving on to the conference finals.
Thank you. To explain what
That's huge.
Mac is saying here, the Miami Heat in the year of 2020, in the bubble, in the
year of
NBA,
2020.
yes, in the year of our Lord, in the NBA bubble in Orlando, managed to beat the first seed in the East, the Milwaukee Bucks, while the Miami Heat were the fifth seed. And move on to the Eastern Conference Finals. It's very exciting.
Unreal.
Awesome. So happy for the Heat. The heat is on. Can you feel the heat down in your soul?
Playoff Jimmy. Playoff Jimbo.
Jimbo, there we go. Yeah, Bam Bam and, Tyler here, everybody. So I'm just happy about that. Unrelated, though.
No, sorry. I wanted to get that on the table because it is extremely important. And I hadn't talked to you about it yet.
And look, now we're discussing it, buddy. And the thing is, my friend, is that I knew that the Heat match up well against the Bucks, right? The next round is going to be tough. Depending. With that being said,
It's probably going to be the Celtics.
I hope not. Go ahead,
That'll
though.
be a great matchup for you guys, though.
Oh, I think the Raptors... Why are we doing this?
I don't know. Okay, anyway, sorry.
Wow, we really derailed.
No, it's only like a minute 30. It's fine. Okay, anyway. So.
Thanks for tapping the
desk.
mic.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're perfect. Remind me again why we're doing this in person?
Because I want to viscerally bother you. I don't want to like distantly bother you anymore. I want to bother you to the point of you like needing to scream.
Perfect.
And I can't do that unless I'm in person.
Good. Go ahead with your gold medal. I mean, whenever you're ready.
You're there. Oh, what if I just don't? What if I just don't?
So for my gold medal.
Okay. Gold medal for me goes to the stunt team. I think that this stunt team did so much heavy lifting for this movie for me. I went through and I counted how much of the movie was on a baseball field. And how much
on an actual baseball field?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Okay, not either practicing or playing the game.
Right. Okay.
Either practicing or playing the game of baseball.
Okay.
And because the movie is 2 hours and 8 minutes long.
Yes.
And the amount of time that they are on a baseball field either practicing or playing is 38 minutes and 31 seconds.
That is nothing.
Really?
Yeah,
I find that impressive.
The reason
for a movie's sake.
Sure, yes, but the reason why I say that's nothing, right?
Because it feels like more?
It feels like more, and yet at the same time, I kind of wish that it was more.
Yeah.
And I'd be more curious about, like, the story, more of the storytelling on the field, right? So, like, I'm happy that we get a lot of the stuff off the field. And if somebody handed me a pair of scissors and was like, hey, cut part of this movie so we can put something else in there, I may have, like, hard times in that movie cutting parts, purely because, like, it all feels kind of important to the story. I'm not sure. I'm talking like a gas bag. I'm not entirely sure, like, the movie does, like you said, those vignettes, at the max capacity, the max sort of performance that it could have. But maybe I would cut some of the, Branch Rickey scenes, or, like, some of the scenes that just don't inherently involve Jackie. Like, because you're watching this movie for Jackie Robinson, right? Like, you want to see his story. And so, like, when we get more, like, info on somebody like Pee Wee Reese, I'm just like, okay, you know, I can, like, for me personally as a viewer, I can live without that. But that's the big thing for me. I do wish that more of the storytelling could have been on the field.
I totally agree. And I specifically agree with that because I think that the best parts of the movie were the stunts on the field, were the making the baseball feel visceral and exciting, and very, very real. And the shots that they got in those 38 minutes were spectacular. Were absolutely spectacular. And specifically, it kind of leads me to one of the points that I find most interesting when talking about any sports movie, which is how much of the movie is spent playing the sport.
Yeah.
Because a while back we watched Remember the Titans, and we talked about Remember the Titans.
That was the first episode, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and significantly less of the movie was football than this was baseball.
I think so. In defense of that movie, I think a big part of that movie has to do with the relationships with one another as a team.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of that does have to be off the field too.
But I think that's the trouble that this movie goes through, is that this movie wants to be about the relationships that are off the field, but there isn't really much.
Yeah. And this movie's about an individual.
Exactly. It's not about relationships. It's not about like a team effort or whatever. It's not like the team like rallies together and finally supports Jackie or whatever, because they don't.
Yeah.
It's just Jackie.
Or at least, like, and also maybe, I don't know the exact history. Maybe the team did warm up to him more towards the end of his career, right? But we only see the first season of him in the major leagues, if I'm not mistaken. We don't really get beyond that. So it's a shame. It's a shame.
But I'm wondering, because of that, because there's very little of this story that is about relationship, like Remember the Titans. I'm wondering if it would have been served better by more of a like 5-act epic structure, where it was like it's more about like a hero going on like an odyssey of some sort, like a journey story, if you will,
as opposed to a story trying to tell a story about an individual with relationships.
Yeah. So I think that this story might have been trying to be too.
To what? You're almost there. You're there.
I think this story should have been more Don Quixote.
Okay.
This story should have been more single person goes on a journey by themselves. It should have been more like that. It should have been more like Odysseus in the Odyssey.
You know what? I agree because as you were saying that, I was thinking about my favorite scene in the film that I discussed in the last segment. Jackie Robinson in the tunnel. Yeah. And just destroying his bat.
So good. Yeah.
In that tunnel. And that for a good minute is just like a one-man scene. Yeah. Right? And it's sort of like a monologue through bodily movements and grunts.
Yeah.
and the storytelling in that moment is at its peak. And I still think Branch Rickey coming in to finish the scene off and having a dialogue with him, like it doesn't make the scene worse. Like, it's still a fantastic scene, like, with that. And I think that conversation helps keep that scene in your mind too. But I think you're absolutely right when it should have been more focused on Jackie, the individual, and what he had to go through, as opposed to like what these players were doing at this time. And something as simple as the Phillies, either, I don't think it was the owner, but probably the team president or the general manager, talking to Ben Chapman, who was played by Alan Tudyk, the super duper racist manager.
Yeah.
That kept doing unsportsmanlike conduct and yelling at Jackie. And so we could have been, perhaps, without that scene, maybe. Like, that scene does give a sort of spring pad to the scene between Ben Chapman and Jackie Robinson taking pictures, right? But I'm more interested in the story for Jackie as opposed to the story of the league, right? Because I think a big thing is that the movie markets to you that it's a story about Jackie, and it is, right? And it's a huge story about his comeuppance. No, not comeuppance. That's definitely the wrong word. His come up, not the comeuppance.
Oh my god, that was so funny. Oh, his comeuppance.
Damn, Jackie.
You know, Rosa Parks and her comeuppance.
Oh, no,
You
no.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Huge mistake. I'm so sorry. Bad slip.
Huge Jackman mistake.
What was I even saying? But I wish the movie was more about Jackie as an individual as opposed to him changing the league, right?
Yes.
Because I think the effect of the movie wanted to show to you, hey, Jackie's changing the league, right? But I don't think that would have been lost if the movie was entirely just about Jackie, as opposed to being a movie about Jackie and the league that he was in.
Totally agree. And I think that comes down to make the conflict, make the central conflict an inner conflict.
Yeah.
Like, don't worry about a like single antagonist type of story structure.
Yeah.
And have each of the villains, have each of the bad guys, have each of the things that he needs to conquer, introduce them, like, show the story of him conquering that villain, and then we don't have to see that person again. Just like Don Quixote, just like the Odyssey, just like all the classic epics.
Yeah. And sort of like tell a baseball, like a sports story as an epic in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, which honestly would kind of have that would have lended to, I think, a more complete Jackie Robinson story, because the interesting part of his story, like we've been talking about, is not the relationships. It is like the more of the like ethereal, like spiritual things that he must conquer in order to get where he is. Because the most interesting parts of the entire film, including what you're talking about, had nothing to do with his relationship with anyone. It was purely internal whenever he had to make the decision, okay, am I going to fuck shit up, or am I going to somehow find it in myself to like calm myself and be this perfect picture of grace.
When the movie focused itself on the external conflict and then having it bubble into the internal conflict that he experienced, it's definitely when the movie it's at its high, as opposed to its low, right? And so, like, you'll get those funny scenes, right? With, for example, when Jackie makes it a point that he's gonna like shower by himself, and one of the other players, the player was Ralph Branca, goes over and was like, hey, why don't you take a shower with us? And like, it has that funny scene because he's not trying to be gay. Funny. It's fine. But something like that scene, right, where did we theoretically need that scene, right? I'm more interested in the story of Jackie Robinson, right? Like, sometimes these other players are interesting, but I'm not watching the movie for them. I think honestly a better example is when the manager Leo DeRocher is fired for a scandal, right? Or at least he's put on leave, and so they have to hire another manager, Bert Schotten, if I have that name right. And so like all those interactions, just stuff we just didn't really need.
Yeah.
You know, like we didn't. Do we necessarily need to have this whole arc for the character or the person of Leo DeRocher and then having a new manager take his place? Like, and it didn't feel like it served the story.
Yeah.
Is my biggest issue with so much of this movie.
Yeah, it was it really did not need to happen like that. I totally agree with you.
And like, especially when you want this movie to be good, right? You want this movie to be fantastic, and it had great moments in it.
Yeah.
You know, I think like another great moment to really like sing praises about this movie is when the character of Pee Wee Reese, even though in real life he didn't say this, maybe tomorrow we'll all wear 42. At the very end of the movie, and that's like such a beautiful moment. And then also when you get the reveal of his jersey having the number 42, like there was something magical about that, because, you know, as an audience member, most of us would know the sort of impact that he had, right?
Yeah.
And most of us, or at least some of us, would know that in all of the MLB, in Major League Baseball, the number 42 was retired for every single team. So when a moment like that is beautiful. So the movie has great moments.
Yeah.
But it gets lost in the in between.
Yeah. And kind of like what you're saying, I think the biggest problem is that it's not just that they are like great moments together, they're great individual moments that stand alone. Like they have nothing to do with the rest of the story. Like for instance, the very end, like that ending like montage type section, and where it had the Pee Wee quote and it like had the 42 and everything. Honestly, you could have shown me like 5 minutes of Jackie Robinson's real highlights followed by that montage and it would have been fine. Like that would have been impactful similarly to the movie. Because the last part was really cool. Chadwick Boseman was really pretty damn good. Yeah. And
because the thing is, too, is that this movie isn't about the team, right? The movie is about this person. Right. So when Remember the Titans at the very end of the film is like all these players went these ways, right? And all these individuals went these ways. Like that works because of how the movie is telling its story, right? But when this movie is trying to pass off, not really pass off, well, actually it is, pass off itself as like
the journey. That was a beginning, middle, and end.
It's like, am I going to jump off the deep end? You know what? I am. This movie tries to pass off itself as a movie about one person, and it kind of cons you, and it's like, no, it's a movie about all these different kinds of people. It's like, I don't care about these kind of people. Like, I'm sure like, Ralph Branca was a cool guy, but like, I don't...
But there's a reason we don't know any of these people. And I've never heard of any of their names. We've only
I'm sure I'm sure some baseball fanatics have heard some of these names. Like, it's as a throwaway line, right? When the Dodgers organization are discussing which black player to bring on, they say the name Satchel Paige, and immediately I'm like, I know that name. He's fantastic, right? Like, there were some names that stuck, right? But what was funny is that none of the names on the Dodgers team stuck. Mind you, like I said, I'm not the biggest baseball fanatic. But if you're trying to, I guess, give this movie to the common person, right? To the Joe Schmo who doesn't know much about baseball or sports, and it's just wants to watch a movie, right? I think the movie does itself a disservice by not telling more of a Jackie Robinson story.
Yeah.
Bada bing, bada boom.
So, what's your gold medal?
Well, my gold medal is to Ben Chapman, the character Ben Chapman, the person Ben Chapman, played by Alan Tudyk, who yells those awful things to Jackie Robinson right before the scene where he'd spat everyone in the tunnel. And the reason why I give that my gold medal is because of just how unsettling that performance is and how disgusting. And you hear all these things Ben Chapman is saying, and it's just awful. It's just awful.
Yeah.
And you never hope for somebody to be put in that situation, but there are still moments today that people are put in those situations, right?
Yeah.
And it's awful to see that happen, but I think I'm giving it the gold medal because of it leading itself to my favorite scene in the whole movie. And I think it was like the only performance in the movie besides Chadwick Boseman's that I was like, that was a damn good job in telling the story.
Yeah.
Right? And sort of like not making it about that character either. Like where that character served his moment in the story was a perfect one. And it led to a beautiful and heart-wrenching moment. And so that is why I have that individual as my gold medal, even though that man should never get a gold medal in his life. I know he's dead now, but it's just awful.
That's a real person.
Yeah, no, these are all real people.
Stories. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and so it became Ben Chapman's legacy essentially that. Yeah, he was the guy who berated Jackie Robinson while he's at bat. Like, that became his legacy. His legacy became a racist. And to that I say accurate. And to the point, kind of good, because he deserves that reputation. And thank you for destroying my desk in the middle of this conversation.
I didn't mean to. Yeah. No, you're right though. That's insane.
But that was the big thing. I just how he served the story. And he was one of the few characters that Here we go. He was one of the few characters in the film that actually gave Jackie Robinson something.
Yeah.
Right? Because you see characters like react to what he's doing.
Yeah.
Right? But never sort of like interact with him. But this one was so important because this man to his face was saying all these awful things.
Yeah.
So it was really important, and it's important in the sort of hero's journey that Jackie Robinson goes through. So even though, like I said, he's awful, I give him the gold medal.
Yeah, and I guess like at the end of the day, the hot take comes with: would you rather have a Branch Rickey and all of the Dodgers, or 5 different getting progressively worse versions of Ben Chapman?
I think there should have been more of a mix of both, because I feel like we saw like too much of the team and the team's reaction, like the catcher who wanted to leave. Like, I don't care really, because it's one of those things that, let's say we cut out once again, if we cut out those scenes of the catcher, I don't even remember his name, of the catcher going up to Branch Rickey like, hey, I want to leave the team, and then later on in the movie, hey, I actually don't want to leave the team. We could have just not had those scenes, and instead the sort of moment before, the sort of given circumstances, right, of him initially not wanting to play with Jackie and then him later on wanting to play with Jackie could have just been acted out in the movie as opposed to just told to us.
Right.
I don't think I could write a better version of this movie, right? But I so much wish for a better version of this movie, because this movie showed potential.
Absolutely.
In some of the performance, I can't say for all the performances, but for some of the performances, and it's such an important story that it's hard not to watch this movie and just shake your fist at it, but in a sort of disappointing way. It's like, I wanted more.
Yeah,
give me more.
I can very vividly imagine you standing up while watching the movie and shaking your fist at the screen. There is no work that I have to do to imagine that.
Really fast question. So supposedly, according to Branch Rickey's either grandson or great-grandson, the original actor for Branch Rickey, it was not Harrison Ford. He was, the man in the movie. Instead, it was Robert Redford. And I just want a quick answer from you as your eyes just take up the
Yeah.
entirety of your forehead. Do you think that would have been a better performance? Yes or no?
Yes. Do you?
Hell yeah.
Big fucking time. Big time.
I don't think Harrison Ford did a poor job, but I
think
heard
he's
that
mediocre.
Robert Redford was originally considered, and I thought to myself, I would have liked to watch that movie.
Yeah. There's
Because Branch Rickey gets too much on-screen time for him to have this sort of performance.
Totally agree. This is the thing. At the end of the day, Harrison Ford is a fine actor, and it's simply because he's a very messy actor, and he always has been.
Yeah.
But he has fun, and that's why you want Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
It's because he has a good ass time.
Yeah.
And you want to have a good ass time with.
I
Harrison
enjoy the Indiana Jones films,
Ford. Absolutely, Star Wars, and yeah, for sure.
and I'm sure like his dialect work in this movie was insanely accurate. Like I don't doubt the homework that he put in.
But
right?
that's the problem.
Uh-huh.
The problem is that he doesn't know he doesn't know the difference between a biographical performance and an impression. And he did an impression for the entire time he was there.
Should we call him up? Should we ask him? Like, hey, do you know the difference between an impression or a biographical performance?
And I bet he'd say, yes, I do. And we'd say, no, you don't, you little bitch.
And then he would tell us how much more money he's making than us. And
he'd blacklist us, probably.
And our careers would...
And we'd be left to only this podcast.
So, what are we viewing next week?
Oh, God. Okay, well, next week we are viewing... So I've kind of been hinting, I've kind of been teasing the audience, if you will,
yes.
over the past, it's month and a half with the whole Avatar talk, because the only reason I made you watch all 3 seasons of Avatar is because I needed you to watch the sequel series, because I think it's going to make for a splendid episode, and that is The Legend of Korra. And I'm not going to say season 1 of Legend of Korra, I'm just going to say as much as you can get through of Legend of Korra.
That is a bold statement. And as a sort of tease, if you couldn't tell by the implication, Mac hates The Legend of Korra.
I think it is a flaming pile of garbaggio.
And I finished the first season today, surprisingly, before this podcast. And I, so far, thoroughly enjoyed it. I had a great time. But this isn't the time, and perhaps another time, we'll discuss The Legend of Korra. Mac, thank you for joining me as usual.
Thank you, and thank you all.